when the Vikings a few months back traded for Yannick Ngakoue, it's kind of one of those deals of you've got Kirk Cousins as your quarterback. You're a team that made it to the divisional round of the playoffs last year. You didn't have to give up a first round pick. Like, is it really that bad of a deal? It's worth the gamble. You were moving on from Everson Griffin. You were hoping that you bring in an Ngakoue and you pair him on the opposite side with Danielle Hunter, and maybe you could have a similar formula on defense to what the Green Bay Packers had in 2019 with the Smith brothers, and maybe that can help kind of carry your defense, and you could be back in playoff position. Well, it is very clear that ain't work. We didn't even make it through half of the season with Ngakoue with the Minnesota Vikings, because after giving up a second and fifth round pick to get him in this offseason from the Jags, they've now turned around and dealt him to the Baltimore Ravens for a third and, I believe, conditional fifth round pick. In less than half a season, they decided it was already time to move on from him. And sure, there are certainly other factors that are playing into that. The Vikings stink. They know they stink. They have no chance. So you got to look at your team, your roster, and you say, okay, we're closer to the number one pick right now than the playoffs. Which trajectory do we really want to go down, especially considering some of the potential future cap concerns that we have? We don't have Ngakoue locked up long term. Let's get rid of him while we can and minimize the loss. Let's call it a loss, but let's minimize the loss and do that now. And there is a part of me that understands that. It's always so easy for us to sit there and knock everybody for making mistakes. This is what we love to do. It's a way that we project our problems onto others. It's a way that we mask our own insecurities for not being perfect and making mistakes ourselves. We love to pounce on, and I'm no different than anybody else. We all do it. And if you say you don't, you're full of shit. You know it. It's what we do as a society. It's just who we are as human beings. We enjoy. As Vince McMahon would say, I enjoy destroying people's lives. Well, we enjoy watching people get built up to tear them down because of their mistakes and then build them back up again. But we enjoy the mistake part, that's for sure. It makes us feel better about who we are. It's so ridiculous. So certainly a lot of people are going to knock the Vikings and general manager Rick Spielman for making this move. And I get it. You traded a second round pick for this guy and a fifth round pick to basically turn around and find a way to turn that second round pick effectively into a third round pick. That's bad stuff. Oh, and don't get me wrong, Rick Spielman deserves a lot of crap for what's going on in Minnesota. And you can certainly make a good argument just to how ridiculous this whole deal was. And I don't blame you. If you're a Vikings fan, you should be irritated and you should be ticked about this. Because you bring in a guy like Ngakoue, maybe you can't foresee what happens with a Danielle Hunter. Maybe you can't foresee just how bad Mike Zimmer is going to do as a coach this year. Maybe you can't foresee just how bad Kirk Cousins is going to be, although certainly I think some of you probably could have foreseen that to some degree. But you got to sit there and say, hey, you're the general manager and you're making moves like this. You've traded away Stephon Diggs, which did get you Justin Jefferson, so it's not all bad, is it? Is it? But you trade away Stephon Diggs, then you trade for Yannick Ngakoue. What are you doing? Are you building for the future? Or are you trying to win now? It sends conflicting signals there, I got to admit. It certainly does. And then the fact that you look at that after 6 weeks of the season, you're trading away Ngakoue already, and in the process, you impacted your positioning in the 2021 draft when your team is going to be in the bad spot. Yeah, I can't blame Vikings fans for being irritated or being pissed off about it, because frankly, they should be, because that's some clown school stuff. You make moves, you take risks, you take chances, and either they pay off or they don't. And if they pay off, you get rewarded. And if they don't, you deserve the heat and the criticism and ultimately the punishment that comes along with it. And this is, to me, a perfect example of why Rick Spielman must go for the Minnesota Vikings and Zimmer the hell along with him. This is not a Vikings team that's supposed to suck. This is supposed to be a Vikings team that's at least in the mix with the Packers and the Bears. And the Cowboys, well, what the hell's the difference? But the Packers and the Bears in the NFC North, they should at least be in that mix, not looking up and seeing Detroit ahead of them in the damn standings. Like, this has been an unmitigated disaster. And it's all of Rick Spielman's creation. It absolutely is. Because he's the one that sat there and said, hey, we don't want to draft a young quarterback. We want to go out and sign Kirk Cousins in free agency like he was going to take you to the promised land. What the hell's wrong with you? And then based off of what you saw last season, with the early season struggles of Cousins in that offense, just because you beat the Saints on the road in the wild card round, in no way, shape, or form constitutes the desire or the need or the impetus and importance of giving Kirk Cousins an unfoundedly, ridiculously stupid, idiotic, dumbass extension when it wasn't called for. That now, if you were trying to move on from him, the dead cap hit would be so sizable and significant for a team that's already facing significant salary cap challenges, like it just makes no sense. You tied your wagon to the Kirk Cousins star. And when you make bad decisions like that, you need to be held accountable for it. And when you trade away a 2nd and 5th round pick to bring in a Yannick Ngakoue who doesn't even make it half a season with your team before you're dealing him away for a 3rd and 5th round pick in a draft next year that you're going to have a really, really high selection, that now you lost that premium 2nd round selection that you could have potentially flipped very easily into a 2nd first round selection, giving yourself a 2nd premium pick in the 1st round on day 1 where you have up to 5 years of team control over that individual even before you get into franchise tags and so forth. You know, that's the stuff that you deserve to be shown the door. It's not always just about the records. It's philosophical things. It's the results of those philosophical approaches and decisions. And you're giving Zimmer and Cousins contract extensions when they're not called for. You're extending Kirk Cousins when you should be preparing for the future, not diving even more into the Kirk pool. And then you're trading away Stephon Diggs for a 1st round pick, which, like I said, luckily for this guy, you can make an argument that the drafting of a Justin Jefferson, washes that away. It becomes a wash, and that's fine and all. But this is also a Rick Spielman that has had a lot of 1st round picks over the years. Like, he's positioned himself in that way to get a lot of premium marquee picks. And what the hell do the Vikings have to show for it? Seriously, what in the hell do they have to show for it? A choke job in the NFC Championship game. An NFC Championship game they only got to because of the Minneapolis Miracle, that last play against the Saints where Marcus Williams blew the tackle. I mean, come on now. And that's what we're talking about here. You went from Case Keenum to Kirk Cousins and decided you wanted to pay a way crap ton more amount of money to Kirk Cousins for very little improvement in performance. That's clown school stuff. That's the type of stuff that should get folks fired. It absolutely, beyond a shadow of a doubt, should. Offensive line still has challenges. What a shame, too, when you talk about Minnesota. You got Adam Thielen. You got Justin Jefferson in the passing game. You got Dalvin Cook and Madison in the running game. Offense should not be a problem, but the offense is a problem, and the defense is also a problem. They're getting their shit pushed in. They're getting rocked. Well, that's a reflection of the poor job you've done in building a team on the defensive side of the ball, and directly a reflection of the head coach, Mike Zimmer. The Vikings at this stage absolutely need a house cleaning. It is time, and I don't think that's an overreaction just to a slow start to the season, because they've put themselves in a bad way. They've hitched themselves to the wrong people. Like I said, when you look at the ultimate results, that's got to matter. And you can say, well, you couldn't really envision that happen. That's totally fair. And you could say that, you can't envision sometimes when you take quarterbacks high in the draft, who's going to pan out and who not. That's right. Sometimes that's just the nature of the beast when you talk about the draft. But it's not always how it works. It comes down to the bottom line results at the end of the day. The Vikings, at their absolute best, are maybe a 10 or 11 win team that's making it to the playoffs and maybe winning one game. Well, that's not what you're in the business for. You're in it to win it all. And if you're not there and you're not going to get there and you don't have the right infrastructure and formula in place to get there, then you have to change all of the ingredients in the formula, change the damn formula itself. And that's where we're at now for the Vikings. Like, as far as the Ravens go, like, what the hell do the draft picks matter right now? Because they're in win it now mode. They got the young quarterback on the rookie contract. And you can bring in another impact edge rusher like Ngakoue and only have to give up a third and conditional fifth-round pick to do so. You do that 100 out of 100 times. You don't even blink if you do that. And good organizations always seem to put themselves in a situation where they can give away peanuts, pennies on the dollar for guys, like they've done here with Ngakoue, like they did with Calais Campbell. Like, that's what really good organizations do. Bad organizations overpay for average NFL starting quarterbacks and give away a marquee second-round pick that ultimately is going to be a high second-round pick that could have been easily flipped into a first-round pick to get an edge rusher that doesn't even last half of a season. So that way, you just basically brought in Ngakoue for 5 or 6 games and flipped him in order to move down a round in the 2021 NFL Draft. Yeah, time to fire Rick Spielman, time to fire Mike Zimmer. If you're a Vikings fan, if you're the Wilfs, it is time to clean house, period.